Yay, it worked. Okay. Here we are again. Welcome, everybody. If you are watching the replay or you are new here, we are here every week. Once I can find a place for my tea bottle. Every week, Sundays, 11:30 a.m. California time till about 1:30 or so. So let's get started here. This week I don't have a comment from Stupidity Delivery Service to answer. So, let's see if there's anything else worth talking about. Got some great comments of how good a teacher I am. Thank you. I've been talking about intonation, trying to get those videos done. Not a whole lot of comments this week. Okay, Ahmed is here. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. And Alan is here. Welcome. Okay, so Ahmed, did one of your students start with thick accent and achieved 100% American accent? So that's a good question. I have had students who have made significant improvements and drastically reduced their accent. But there's two things here. Welcome, Dungeon Master. So to reach 100%, there's two things here. Number one, there's the law of diminishing returns. And in case you're not familiar with that, the law of diminishing returns, let's say you're a beginner with something, everything is new. So you feel like you're learning very quickly because there's so much to learn. Okay. As you get better, there's less to learn, less to improve, right? Still might be a lot to do, but not compared to a beginner. And so, and you start getting more comfortable, right? That's usually the intermediate plateau, just generally in skills. You reach the intermediate plateau, you feel comfortable. You can, in case of a language, you can communicate fairly well. Welcome, Wendell. Welcome, Marco. From Mexico. Muy bien. Nos Redna is here. Welcome. Everybody's joining the chat today. I like it. Okay. And when you reach up into the advanced level, right, you know most of the things. And so in order to make more improvement, there's less and less that you need to improve, that you need to learn. And it can also become more and more difficult to get that last little bit to 100% perfect. Now, in reality, you usually don't need to take things to 100%, right? Like the C1 level in languages is, what, let's say if you're going to get a job in a foreign country, usually they'll require maybe a B2, upper intermediate, but usually a C1 that's like advanced proficiency, professional working proficiency, they call it. You don't even need a C2 level, right? So at the C1 level, you're already very, very, very advanced. Now, I know you're asking specifically about pronunciation here. When it comes to something that the fundamental mechanical physical level, where it's based on your senses, right? So here we have our ears being able to perceive the sounds and all that stuff, and then the mouth being able to produce the sounds. It's the lowest level physical creation of the language. When we're talking about that level, that's where the law of diminishing returns really kicks in, and it can be very, very difficult to get 100% everything, like all the sounds, intonation, stress. So I've had many students, as I said, that have had a lot of improvement. They've drastically reduced their accent. And then they reach a point where they're like, I'm okay. I'm good. I'm happy enough. Now, there are some students that I've worked with that they really want to have that 100% goal. And we had some particular challenges and issues that we were trying to work on. And then, their situation changed or whatever, and we didn't continue. The second thing I want to mention is, in the past, I didn't know about mouth posture. I didn't know about that concept, which somebody on the last live stream, they commented after the stream. They left a comment mentioning something in linguistics called articulatory setting, which I haven't looked too much into. Hello, Stupid Delivery Service. I haven't looked too much into, but based on what they were describing, it seems to be the same concept of mouth posture. Now, and that's very validating and reassuring for me, because this idea of mouth posture is, I came upon it myself, right? I sort of discovered it for myself through my own thoughts and intuition in language, because my skills are in language. And I started thinking about this idea, maybe there's like a posture, like a way that speakers of a particular language or dialect sort of hold the vocal tract, and how like the tongue is held by default without, speaking. And then through speaking, there's sort of like a central posture attention that's maintained, through speech. And that would be different from language to language, or even dialect to dialect. And as I started researching that term, I actually found out that it is a concept called mouth posture. I called it the same thing. So I was like, yay, I called it the same thing. And there are other people talking about it. So I'm on the right track. And then this person mentioned articulatory setting, which was even more validating, because it's like, okay, this is actually like a legitimate recognized thing. I'm not just some crazy guy who's running on intuition, coming up with crazy ideas, because sometimes I feel that way. I have not reached the end of the mouth posture course. Now, I feel very strongly that if somebody goes through this mouth posture course and takes it all the way to the end, which is not easy, but if they take it all the way to the end using some of the techniques that I'm developing, as well as some techniques that already exist, like shadowing, I feel pretty confident that anybody who goes through that process seriously through the whole thing will either achieve a 99% perfect accent or a 100% perfect accent. But I haven't reached the end of the course with anybody. It's still sort of in beta, still kind of in development. So far, the results are very, very positive, very good. But until I reach the end of that, I can't say that it can take you to 100%. So in my personal experience, for various reasons, I have not gotten anybody to a 100% accent. I've gotten people pretty close. But through this mouth posture process, I'm hoping to create a reliable, sort of reproducible, or very scientific, reproducible process that pretty much anybody can use in order to achieve a 100% accent in any language. But of course, it's going to be focused on American English, because that's what I'm teaching. But the basic concept and techniques will apply to any language or any dialect. So yeah, that's a good question. I will say also on the flip side, though, so my Spanish, again, I didn't know about mouth posture. I haven't actively tried to improve my Spanish in a long time. But I got my Spanish to a very, very good point, to the point where, natives will tell me that they can't tell where I'm from, right? Most Americans, they speak Spanish. They're like, quiero un burrito. It's like, okay, yeah, you're an American for sure. But I don't sound that way. And there's a couple sounds, mostly the rolled R, that I've always had difficulty with, which is one of the most difficult sounds for Americans to get. But after discovering this concept of mouth posture or articulatory setting, I realized that the reason why it's extremely difficult, it's not because, it is partially because we've never had to do that with our tongue, but we do the flap D, right, which is similar. It's not the same, but it's similar. So we can kind of get our tongue to do that. But the American mouth posture is very open. Everything is very open. We have a lot of space. So when we flap that D, our jaw is here, and our tongue is coming all the way up and tapping. and depends on what's before and after, but we always have this space because of the posture. Where in Spanish, the jaw is a little more closed, the tongue is slightly pushed forward, and it's literally in a good position to be able to do that. Same with Russian. Russian has a trilled R also. It's more closed, pushed forward. They're in position. It's a lot harder you can do a single tap, but it's a lot harder to do a multiple tap when you have so much space. Okay, so it's that mouth posture that's actually the source of the difficulty. Um, I can't say I've mastered the Spanish accent. I'll probably go back to Spanish at one point and refine everything. But even not knowing how to learn a language, not knowing how to learn pronunciation, just Spanish was the first language that I successfully taught myself. And I was just exploring lots of different ideas, doing research, looking at different polyglots, trying different things out, really trying to figure out how to make it work. And even through that, not knowing what I was doing, I managed to achieve a very, very good accent. Basically just running on intuition and exploring and experimenting with things. So I think that also speaks a bit to my ability or potential ability. But anyway, okay, Alan, hi. Dungeon Master, hi. Wendell, hi. Marco, hi. Let's read the hi. Okay, Dungeon Master, you kind of gotta make a vid how to go from 0 to 100 in English. There's so much junk you waste your time on while learning. Well, I wouldn't put it necessarily from 0 to 100 because there's a lot involved in a language. I mean, if we're just talking about the spoken language, there's already a lot. But if we talk about the language as a whole, there's also reading and writing, and it's a big complicated thing. That's why I wrote the book on how to learn a language, building your path to fluency, because there's no one right best path necessarily. But I do have a plan at some point. I was hoping to do it this year. It's probably not going to happen. To create the English blueprint that I've been working on, or I was working on for a while in the past. And it's going to be designed to take you from absolute zero, like no English, you don't even know the word hi, to upper intermediate, or at the very least lower intermediate, without, like, most courses, right, especially as beginner, like they teach you all these like fine little grammar rules and all this stuff, and it's gonna go over, it's gonna throw a lot of that out. A lot of the smaller details are going to be through exposure. There's tons and tons and tons of different activities, especially listening based, that's going to be in that blueprint course. And you're constantly tackling the language from different angles, speaking from very early. It's built into the system, even if you're just speaking to yourself. And the grammar focus is going to be mostly on a lot of the bigger points, like verb conjugations and using grammar hacks, like for example, right, we say like I go, I can go, I will go, right? Like it doesn't change. Like you add the modal, and you drastically expand what you can potentially talk about, what you can say, or even what you can understand using modals, right? So it's not actually a conjugation, if you're changing the mode of the verb, and it sort of gives you a massive benefit for a little piece of grammar knowledge. So anyway, more on that later. Wendell, can I use which in a relative clause to add more information in this sentence? John, which is the person that works at school, is going to be in charge of the problem. Okay, so when we're talking about people, you're supposed to use who generally. That's the idea, right? So John, who is the person that works at school, that would probably be better. If you say John, which is the person that works at school, it doesn't sound too bad. I can definitely imagine it happening. Like it might come out of a native's mouth, but I would say who would be better. Alan, in words like poodle, local, turtle, I hear a schwa vowel instead of the final L consonant. For example, in local, I hear something like loco in Spanish mean crazy. Yes, I know what loco means. So what you are probably hearing, this definitely has to be an ear training problem, especially since so if you look in the dictionary and you look at the way most people teach this, there'll be an L colored schwa. So you'll have like the schwa symbol and then the L, and it's the dark L, right? You don't like the L colored schwa doesn't have to exist. That's one of the hacks that I give you guys. You can always just use the dark L straight because it basically does function like a vowel itself. It doesn't matter. So instead of saying like poodle, right? You say poodle, you just go straight into the L. Local, local, instead of local, local. Perfectly fine. You'll still sound perfectly natural, neutral, normal. Now, if you're hearing a schwa, that would be puda, loca, turda. That would be a schwa. So, and I doubt you're hearing that now that you hear me say it. Maybe you are. I don't know. But you probably need to fine tune your ear between the schwa and the that dark L sound. Probably all it is. If it's not, and you have further information, then we can explore that maybe. But I think it's probably an ear problem. Okay, Wendell, my wife, who is a teacher, always goes to school. Can I replace who for which in that case? My wife, which is a teacher. This definitely doesn't sound good with which, no. I think in the first case, if you say which, it doesn't sound as bad because you're saying which is the person. Even though like for people, we're supposed to use who, but it's like the person. It's a weird thing. I'm not even going to try to explain that. How my brain associates that. But as I said in the first case, who definitely sounds a lot better. In this case with my wife, if you say which, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't sound right. Potentially, it might even seem rude to people because it's like you're looking at your wife as an object instead of as a person. Some people might get that association or feeling from it. So yeah, definitely who. Generally, if you're talking about a person, as I said, you want to use who. Now between which and what, that's a different, more complicated story. I think exposure and time gets you 90 to 95% of what an average native speaker uses or knows. The other 5%, they still know it, but not as common to use, so that requires more effort to learn. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole topic in itself. Definitely exposure is always the key. It doesn't matter, as I said before, like this is English hacks. I can give you all the best hacks in the world. It's not going to magically just bam, oh, I know the language. No, unfortunately, skill development doesn't work that way. What the hacks do is, or what they're supposed to do at least, is drastically reduce the amount of exposure and the amount of time that it takes to not only understand and be able to use things, but also to feel them. That's the ultimate form of a hack, is to literally hack into the feeling, which normally would take you many years to build the feeling of how, like, oh, this just sounds right in the language. That's what the logic of prepositions is about. I'm using the same approach in the intonation course to help you actually build that feeling of it instead of just getting used to it. So Wendell, the present which I got was good versus the present that I got was good. Okay. So from a pure grammar standpoint, I'd have to look it up to be sure, but just from a native standpoint, they both sound fine to me. If you say which, to me, it feels a little bit more like there was more than one possible present. And you're saying, okay, well, this is the one specifically compared to the other ones. Where if you say the present that I got, that is just linking. The word that is just linking. It feels very plain, very bland. To me, they both sound good. They mean basically the same thing, but which can have a little bit of that little extra feeling of there was more than one option. Because that's kind of what which is about, right? We're like, well, there's more than one thing, and which one are we talking about? So the boy who helped me always goes to school. Can I replace who for that? The boy that helped me. Okay. So instead of replacing who with which, replacing who with that. This is one that I think, if I remember right, is grammatically incorrect if you change it for that. However, it's very natural and perfectly fine, perfectly acceptable. The boy that helped me, the boy who helped me. Not a problem. Not a problem at all. Yeah. Stupid delivery services, welcome. Wendell retracted a message. Dungeon Master, I don't know if there's another option for now, but mouth posture, MP, mouth posture, actually works and gets it done, but nowhere close to efficient. Well, Dungeon Master is also sort of blazing his own path with my guidance compared to actual lessons. So your experience is going to be a little bit different. I think that it probably could be more efficient. Maybe I just haven't thought of how to make it more efficient. I think it's extremely efficient. It's just in its current form, which I don't know if I can get rid of this aspect at some point. In its current form, it's very, I guess you could say, labor intensive. There's a lot of work that you have to put into it. Now, a lot of that work you would have to put in anyway, because we're talking about, like, in order to find a new sound, like say okay, you have to like do micro adjustments, high iterations, make lots of little changes to sort of find the sound. That's still in the mouth posture course. It's still a natural part of it. That's where a lot of the work comes from, is finding the sounds. Building the mouth posture itself is actually relatively like once you get basic command over the vocal tract, which is phase 0, that's really the hard part. Everything else aside from finding new sounds is relatively easy and smooth. And it gets easier and easier as you go, because you're constantly re-solidifying that mouth posture as you build more sounds in. So I think it's actually highly efficient. Although in the beginning it might seem kind of like, why am I doing this? I have to constantly reassure the people that I'm working with when they're at like the low levels, like in phase 0 especially, and they're like, why am I moving my throat in different directions? Why am I moving this part of my tongue in different directions? And they say, oh, I trust you. I can kind of see how this could be relevant. But I always have to reassure people, trust me, wait till we get to the sounds, go through this process. And every single person that I've worked with, every single person, some people just disappear because they're like, I'm not doing this. This is stupid. This is nonsense. But all the people who actually stick it out through phase 0, through phase 1, who start building the sounds in phase 2, every single person without exception reaches a point where it clicks, it starts making sense, and they look back on the work they did and they're like, oh my God, all that phase 0 work was the single most important work that I ever did in my entire life for pronunciation. No exceptions. Everybody says that. So I've even had this with Dungeon Master. I've had to tell him several times. There's several points where he, he'll go through the process and then he realizes this and he realizes that. And he realizes, and he's like, hey, you're right. This is true. And that's true. And I'm like, it's kind of like I know what I'm talking about. You guys don't listen to me. So anyway, that's why I call it the Miyagi element, by the way. That's another concept I have for skill building in general. It's that seemingly hidden element that seems so obvious that it either is completely missed or completely ignored, or it just seems too easy, like, whatever. And then people who go through phase 0, it's like, hey, can you take just the back of your tongue, move it up, down, forward, back without moving anything else, not engaging your throat, not, moving the rest of the tongue, keeping all that in place. And at first you might think, that sounds pretty easy, I could do that. And then you try it and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And then you might start to realize, oh, okay, well, how can I get these sounds that I'm trying to build if I can't control the pieces of my tongue? It's like that's a prerequisite that's underlying, right? We're saying, oh, hey, this is how you pronounce this sound, this is how you pronounce that sound. Well, if you can't make your tongue do that, then there's no point in talking about how to produce the sound, because you can't get your tongue to do that, right? So you have to go deeper than that and actually get control over the vocal tract itself. I call it the Miyagi element from the Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi. I won't go into that whole story there, but wax on, wax off, we'll say that. Doesn't seem related to karate, but it was directly relevant. Anyway, fall ETA in majority 2023 ETA. It takes a lot of time. Well, ETA means estimated time of arrival. I don't know if you're responding to something that I said, or if you're asking like plans for the fall in 2023, or if you're commenting on mouth posture. Anyway, whatever. Okay. Anderson, you're expecting her to carry that child to term. What does carry something to term means? Okay. This is I don't think it has a use outside of this context. Maybe it does. But this is to carry a child to term, right? Term is when it's born, right? That's which is kind of weird. It's what it means, what term means in this particular context. It's sort of a weird, special, specific use of term, but it just means like have the child. Like you're not going to get rid of it before it's born, basically. So it's a weird phrase. He's on the blink. He's on the blink. I don't know if that's Gen Z. Might be a Gen Z thing. I want to think that's kind of like he's on the fritz, meaning like, which we usually use that for things, not people, meaning that like something isn't working right. Like my computer's on the fritz, it's not working right. I don't know if it's not related to that, then I have no idea. Adaptness. I see Fluent American is here. Oh man, the beard's coming in here. Now this is pretty shallow. I've had much more impressive beard before. It doesn't usually get to that point because I end up shaving at some point. But yes, welcome, Fluent American. Still toying with StreamYard. Once I get it set up, I'm probably going to invite you on. If you have time, we'll work that out. But still, I've been putting it off. I know it would be better because I know I can push buttons to make things pop up on the screen, and that'll be really cool. So I need to get on it, but it's in my brain. It's in my brain. Okay, so adaptness versus adeptness. Is the difference clear, or even Americans mistake both? Adaptness, is that even a word? Oh, that is a word. Adaptedness is being fitted. There's adaptness versus adeptness. Apparently adaptness is a word. I didn't know that word. Definitely not a common word. Adeptness means like you're really good at something. Adaptness does not mean that. So is the difference clear? Now, I don't know if this is a pronunciation question or a vocabulary question, like the meaning. The meaning would be very different. The pronunciation would be similar. One uses a, one uses eh. Of course, we can use the lazy a. It's going to sound very, very similar, but I don't think we would have any trouble hearing the difference between the two. Now, somebody might say adaptness and actually use that word, but because I don't think many people know that word, they might interpret it as adeptness and then just think maybe you said it a little weird. So you might have some difficulty there. But Dungeon Master, take your time with StreamYard. Yeah. Will do. Dungeon Master, mouth posture and sounds is like trying to reach an object far away on a shelf with your arm stretched really hard and barely touching the thing. Oh, blueprint. Okay. It can feel that way. Again, you're kind of blazing your own path a little bit on that. I don't know if my other students would describe it that way. Maybe. But I can kind of get that sense in a way because I've played with the Spanish posture, and it's really hard to get that center of gravity from the American posture out of my Spanish, and even harder to get the tension in the back of the tongue, because that seems to be a common thing that I've found for many languages, because many languages seem to have the tongue pushed slightly forward, but in addition to it being pushed slightly forward, there's a lot of extra tension like in the back of the back, around like the top of the throat area. It's just like rock solid. And I can't speak for all languages, but in Spanish, at least, that makes sense because Spanish is mostly spoken from up here. The front of the tongue is very light, not just for trilling that R, but just for sounds in general. And so the back of the tongue kind of gives all that support so that the tongue can kind of do its thing. American English works completely differently. We don't have all that extra tension back there. Our tension is centralized in the mouth. So yeah, it could be difficult to fully get the core of not necessarily the central sound, but to really get like the core of the posture and like relax that back there, because you've always held that tension there if your language does that, and you don't even realize it, you don't feel it. So that's why a lot of the phase zero work, which also translates past phase zero because it's a recurring issue. But that's why a lot of the phase zero work is very difficult, because if you've never tried to feel, your throat or your tongue or this or that, it's like a catch-22, right? Like you go to get a job, but you have no experience, and all jobs want you to have experience, so nobody will hire you to get the experience, right? And so you're sort of stuck in this cycle. You need the experience for the job, but you can't get the experience without the job. It's sort of a similar thing. It's like you can't feel what you're doing, but in order to feel what you're doing, you have to be able to do it. So that's why you kind of have to like wiggle your way through, practice and exploring and trying to figure out different things to start becoming more aware and build the feeling, and then get that control. So yeah, how you're describing it can make sense. It's like something's just out of your reach. Blueprint, yeah. So for the blueprint, okay, so you're talking about that for the ETA. Yeah, I don't know. Things adapt and develop, and my goal is to try to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We do seem to be picking up steam a bit, because I was getting, every once in a while I'll sort of look at the subscriber count and estimate sort of how many people on average I'm getting a day. I don't pay too much attention to it. I'm just curious to see how fast the channel is growing. And for the longest time, like through a lot of last year into the first part of this year, it was maybe like between, say, like 5 and 10 or so a day, roughly. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. More recently, since I started the intonation course, it seems to be going up more by between like 12 and 20 a day. So that's nice. um, so I'm things are kind of tough right now financially. I have to put in a little more work in my second job. I'm trying to give more classes as well, fill up some more time there because I got some things I need to pay for and whatnot. But I'm trying, like right now, almost all of my free time is channel. You know, it takes so long for me to edit stuff. But I'm gonna try to do shorts and this and that, whatever. And then like I was doing the verb book, but then that kind of fell away for various reasons, including the intonation course. Like I spend a lot of my time thinking about or editing videos for the intonation course. So once that's done, you know, I don't know. But as I said before, I have lots and lots of plans. We're going to be covering more than just pronunciation. There's beginner stuff, grammar stuff, vocabulary stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all coming. It's just I can only do so much at a time. So I try to make plans and like, okay, you know, this year or this quarter of this year, I want to do this, and then maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. But the plan is still there. I do plan to still get to everything. Abdullah, welcome. Unfortunately, I have an exam tomorrow, so I can't attend the stream. However, have fun, guys. Well, thank you for stopping by. You're probably already gone. Good luck with your exam. But yeah, thanks for saying hi. Dungeon Master, I'm almost at that point too of realizing how to learn something fast. It takes experience learning a language from zero to advanced native fluency, kind of. Also, a lot of people get caught up in being advanced versus being fluent, whether basic or advanced fluency. So far, exposure is the only way, just like MP for speech. Yeah, well, there's nuances there. I won't spend a whole lot of time on that, but I do definitely agree on the advanced versus fluency. Like, there's still people, for whatever reason, who think like, oh, if you don't know every word in the language, you're not fluent. It's like, do you know every language? Do you know every word in your language, especially if you're a native English speaker? I can guarantee you don't. I don't care how educated you are. There's a very good chance that you do not know every word in your language. And I can guarantee you don't know every word in the English language, even if you're a native speaker, just because we have too many words. So yeah, that's why there's conversational fluency, which is very comfortable. You can pretty much talk about whatever you want, and that's just B2. That's upper intermediate. People drastically there's I forget what I called it, but there's this perception from somebody on the outside who would be like a beginner in that skill. Once you reach upper intermediate in any skill, but especially in a language, and you have that B2, I'm talking about like not just like, oh, your listening skills are a B2. Like we're talking about actually your ability, your speaking skills are a B2. Your conversational. Somebody from the outside, especially if they don't speak that language, they're going to look at you speaking to somebody else. You're going to be making these little grammar mistakes and pronunciation mistakes, but to that person, wow, this guy knows how to speak that language, right? Their perception of you is up here because their knowledge and ability and the skills down here. Even though reality, you know, you're not here, you're here. But there's that perception. And so when people talk about like being, you know, like mastery of a skill, or which would be fluency, you know, like native like fluency in a language, I do think native like fluency is a good term as compared to conversational fluency. There's definitely a difference there. Some people just think fluency is the one. It's just native fluency, which is ridiculous. But what was I saying? When yeah, the all you really need to create like what I would call a base level of mastery is that B2 level. And pretty much anybody in pretty much any skill, I don't care if it's learning the guitar or whatever instrument, it could be the piano. If you're learning a language, I don't care how different that language is from your language. If it's very different, like Japanese to English, it might take you a little bit longer, be a little bit harder. If you're learning how to program, if you're learning how to draw, right, art stuff, almost anybody in almost any skill, I feel 100% confident in that you can get that B2 level within 3 to 6 months. right? If you're doing the right things, you can't just, do anything. There's certain techniques, going to the fundamental unit level in languages, that would be pronunciation, specifically mouth posture, on top of that. But if you focus on the right things, 3 to 6 months, I don't care who you are. Maybe if you're particularly weak in something, then it might take you a year. It might take you twice the time. But people have this really, it makes sense. It's logical because of the outsider perspective looking at the person doing the skill. But people have this really flawed misunderstanding of what having the skill, like at what point can you say you have the skill, and you can be comfortable in that skill, not perfect, not 100% mastered, but comfortable. And that's always that upper intermediate B2 level in any skill. That's all you got to get to. That's all you got to get to. Once you get to that, you're good. Now, if you want to go farther than that, for whatever reason, that's also perfectly fine. You can do that. But anyway, Dungeon Master. Schwa before L is your eating vowels video summed up pretty much. You mean no schwa before L? Yes and no. Yes and no. So I don't even consider this eating vowels. This would be like, it's the same thing with right? So if you look in the dictionary, and the way that most people teach this, if there's like, say, an L at the end of the word, or an R sound at the end of the word, you'll commonly see, like with the L, it's like schwa and then L, or if it's with the it might be like schwa plus like an R, or it could be like that weird schwa with the tail or something like that. I don't know. It's like a variation of the schwa symbol. But regardless, most sources will say, okay, well, there's this sort of schwa before that, vowel or L, dark L, what I call the L vowel. And there are speakers who speak that way. That's a very neutral, natural way to speak, but it's not required to sound neutral or natural. The way that I speak, when I say, like, if I say people, it's not people. There's no schwa there. Okay, I'm not eating the schwa. It just doesn't exist. It's just, we're going from the second P in people straight into that half L vowel sound, the dark L. Same thing with if I say, I don't use girl because that also has an L at the end. But if I say, it's just complicated. If I say her, for example, I'm literally just doing an H and the sound. It's not her, right? It's her. Like, H is the voiceless vowel, so I'm already in the position. I'm not in the schwa position and then move to the as I go through the sound. No, I'm in the position. I start with breath for the H. You can already hear it. And then I just add the voice. Her. My tongue doesn't move at all. Okay. You don't have to, even though some speakers have an R-colored schwa and some speakers have an R-colored L, you don't have to use that to sound neutral and natural. It's something you can do if you want, but you're just making your life harder. So that's why the way I teach it is it's just easier for you guys. That's one of the English hacks, right? Make English easier. Okay, anyway, simple trick, who, people, animals sometimes. Yeah, maybe. That can happen. Which objects, animals? Yeah, generally who for people, which for objects. Animals are sort of that little gray zone, because we get attached to animals and this and that. We might say who, but it's still kind of weird. It's kind of contextual too, because, like, let's say, I don't know, like, let's say if I have cats or dogs or whatever, and I feed them every morning, right? And it's morning time, and of course, they're ready to eat, and I can say, like, who's hungry? Like, which like I might say to, you know, my child or something, like, who's hungry, right? Who's ready to eat? But I'm talking to animals, so obviously, like, I wouldn't say, you know, which one of you is hungry. Well, I guess I could say that, but it's just that would be saying a slightly different thing. So anyway, you can also use that for people too. See, that's why it's not so clear cut, right? If I'm talking to a person, or even if I'm talking about a person, right, I can say which person is hungry. Right? Now I could also say who is hungry. That could apply to all the people. But if I'm specifically saying, okay, I know that there's one person who's hungry and the other person or other people are not, I can say which person is hungry. So it's not always a clear cut, like, oh, you have to use who with people. But in general, when Wendell was asking about sort of like that subordinate clause, extra information, so like my wife, and then more information, who is the teacher, that we're generally going to use the who, because we're pointing back to that person. Where if just because I use which doesn't necessarily mean I'm looking at the person as an object. I'm trying to say which person, right? So anyway, hopefully that makes sense. I didn't make that more confusing. Okay, I'm gonna leave. Chat be good. I'm done spamming. Everybody have a good one. Yes, okay, well, bye, Dungeon Master. Thanks for stopping by and contributing to the chat. Much appreciated. Superior Delivery Service. You've been quiet today. The more syllables a word has, the shorter the stressed syllable is going to sound. I'm gonna have to think about that. I don't think so. Like the stressed syllable in car sounds longer than the one in carpenter. Well, let's see. I never thought about that particular detail. Car. I have a car. I have a car. I have a car. I have a carpenter. I have a carpenter. Carpenter. Car. Car. Carpenter. Carburetor. Carpenter. Well, okay. So one thing to keep in mind here, right? We could also have that. Remember, we were talking before how if you have a vowel before a voiced consonant like a D, kid, versus a voiceless consonant like a T, kit, the difference in length is an illusion because of how English stress works. But we did talk about how, right, so if I'm going from A into D, kid, I hold the voice the entire time, where if I'm going into the T, I have to drop the voice before going into the T, which technically you could say is making the vowel shorter in a way, but I don't look at it that way. I'm still transitioning. It's still the same distance, still the same amount of time to say the sound. It's just because I'm dropping the voice in order to do the T sound, we get this illusion that maybe this vowel is shorter. So here, right, we have car, which doesn't have anything after it, right? R is a vowel. It's an R-colored vowel. If you say carpenter, okay, so we have a voiceless vowel, and that could create the illusion that maybe it's shorter. What if I say carburetor, right? So it's very similar. Now we have a B instead of a P. So I have a car. I have a car. I have a carpenter. I have a carpenter. I have a carburetor. I have a carburetor. I have a car. I have a carburetor. I have a car. I have a carburetor. To me, I don't think I would agree with the statement that the more syllables a word has, the shorter the stress syllable sound is. Not only would that run counter to the way that English generally works, because we want that stressed syllable, especially if it's a multi-syllable word, it needs to stand out. Just because you have multiple syllables doesn't mean that it's going to like compress or something. That doesn't make any sense theoretically. So you could get, say, if there's like a P after it, like in carpenter, you could get that illusion that maybe it's kind of shorter, because we have to go to that voiceless sound. But if I say car and carburetor, I maybe it's a super small difference, but I don't think so. I have a car. I have a carburetor. I have a car. I have a carburetor. Carburetor. I have a car. I have a carburetor. I have a car. I have a carburetor. A carburetor. That's kind of a tough one. I have a car. I have a car. I have a carburetor. Maybe there is. Car, carburetor. Car, carburetor, carburetor. See, let me see if I try to match it. Car, carburetor, carburetor. Sounds maybe like emphasis. Carburetor, carburetor. So playing with it, it would be my opinion that if there's multiple syllables, it may be possible to slightly shorten that stress syllable, but it's something that can happen, not something that does happen or has to happen. And I'll try to think about it more over the next week. We can maybe come back to it, try to play with it, think of some other examples. But that's going to be my current stance. It can happen, but it doesn't have to happen. And I think I know the reason for that. But anyway, yeah, that would be my answer for now. I realize the word car is a single syllable word. Wait, what? Oh yeah, I know. Okay. Alan, yes, I believe I hear dark, like you say, in words. Oh, like, I don't know if that was like a IPA letter J, so it's like Lie or something. Like, what's Lie? This is just typo. Like you say in words like local. Okay, well then that's not a schwa. Yeah, so, and as I said before, like some people, like in the word local, they might say local, call with there's a little schwa and then the L. But you don't have to do that. You can go straight from the K into the L. Col, local, local. No problem with that. So what you're probably hearing is just people not putting the schwa in then, which is, again, very common and natural. Not everybody speaks that way, but both ways are very neutral, natural sounding pronunciations, because it doesn't create much of a difference. So make your life easier. Wendell, I play bad or I play wrong. Those are two completely different statements. If you play bad, which it probably should be badly, but we'll commonly use bad anyway. If you say I play bad, that means that you don't have your skill at playing this game is not good. You don't have the skill. Okay, so you're not good at playing that game. If you say I play wrong, that means that you're not playing the game the way that it's supposed to be played. Like maybe you're breaking the rules. So yeah. So for example, chess, right? If you don't play chess well, you play bad, or poorly, right? You can say bad, it's fine. If you say I play bad, that just means like you're following the rules, right? Like you're moving the pieces the way that they can move according to that piece. You're just not good at the game. If you say I play wrong, So let's say we know like a pawn has the option to move one space forward, right? So let's say you take the pawn and you try to move one space diagonal back. Pawns can't do that, if I remember chess right. So that would be playing wrong. You're not playing the game the way that it's supposed to be played. They reacted well. They reacted right. Same type of difference. If you say they reacted well, that means it was positive. They liked it. If you say they reacted right, that means that in different contexts, different explanation, but it's the same type of thing. They reacted right. Talking about compared to the previous example. There's a way that you wanted them to react. Not necessarily just like, well, I hope they react positively, but like a specific reaction. Like you're planning everything out so that they react in a specific way. Oh, they reacted right. They reacted the way that I wanted them to react. Or I mean, I don't know if there's a wrong way to react necessarily. I guess there might be contexts where that would work. Maybe if you're a person who has difficulty reading, say, like emotion from people's faces or voices, like is common in, say, autism or whatever, you might not react right according to the social and cultural expectation because you're having difficulty reading what the person meant, right? So if somebody's very angry at you, but you can't tell they're angry, and your response doesn't match, that interaction, then you didn't react right or correctly, right? So that one's a little more abstract, kind of blurry lines there, but yeah, there's definitely a difference between well and right, or bad and wrong. I'm having trouble with these sentences. Car seems good, or the car seems well. Eat bad or eat badly. We play bad, or we play badly. We ate bad. We ate badly. Yeah. Okay. So if you say the car seems good or the car seems well, the car seems well. We probably want to use well with car. So if I'm describing how I am, right? I say, oh, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm well. That's what you're supposed to say. But almost everybody will say I'm good, or maybe I'm fine. But um, even with doing, you're supposed to say I'm doing well, which people will say, but it's also very common to say, oh, I'm doing good. It's perfectly fine, perfectly normal. But for a car can't be well. A car doesn't have health in the same way that a person does. And so it seems kind of weird. If you say the car seems good, that would be fine. Like it seems like it's working fine. Seems like everything's good, right? Everything is good with the car. So we'd probably say good in that case. Eat bad or eat badly. So when you have a modifier for a verb, you're supposed to use an adverb, right? So that's an adverb you're adding to the verb. So it should be eat badly. Now, eat is a weird case here because like you don't know how to eat. That's what that means. It's like I'm not good at eating. So that's just a weird case. And both of them sound kind of weird because of the case. But badly would be correct. We play bad or we play badly. Okay, now so the difference between bad and badly, again, technically it's supposed to be the adverb. However, it is very, very, very common, especially when using the words good and bad specifically, that we won't use the adverb. We do still commonly use it, but it's also very common to just use the adjective, like we play bad. So both of those work just fine. Technically, play badly is correct, but both of them are fine. We ate bad or we ate badly. Again, with eating, it's strange in itself. We ate right or we ate well. again, because it's eating, it's sort of a strange case. If you say we did it right or we did it well, same differences before. If you do it right, you do it correctly, the way that it's supposed to be done. If you do it well, that means you have skill. You're good at doing it, which means, of course, you're doing it correctly, but it's not about saying that you're doing it correctly. It's saying that you have skills. Two different statements. Which is the correct way to express the idea of being sick in a hospital? I'm in the hospital. I'm in hospital. I'm at hospital. I'm at the hospital. This is a good question. There's, if I remember correctly, there's a difference between British English and American English here. We say in American English, if you say I'm in the hospital or I'm at the hospital, both of those are grammatically correct and both of those are fine, but they mean two different things. If I remember right, in British English, I think it's the same difference. Maybe, I'm not completely sure. But either way, they will use one of those without the. I know that much for sure. I don't know if it's in or at, or if it's both with a different meaning. But they don't use the. So they'll say like I'm in hospital, which is weird from an American perspective. It doesn't. It's weird to hear a British person say that, because it's like English came from Britain, and yet to us it sounds like broken grammar. It's a very strange feeling. But anyway, if you say I'm at the hospital, okay, well, let me do that one first. If you say I'm in the hospital, that means you are a patient, right? So you got injured, you got sick, you got whatever, and they're giving you care, right? Maybe you're having surgery, whatever it is. So you're there for a medical related reason. You are the patient. I'm in the hospital. Okay, so the reason why we use in is always a container. That's the logic of in. So literally, it's like you're in that box, and the reason you're in that box is because that's where you belong right now, because you're a patient. You have some medical thing that needs to be taken care of. If you say I'm at the hospital, now when you're in the hospital, you are also simultaneously at the hospital, but that's just the physical reality. If you tell somebody I'm at the hospital, you are specifically telling them that that is your location. You are not saying that you are a patient. So let's say my friend breaks their arm. I take them to the hospital. Okay, now we're both at the hospital, but they are in the hospital, physically in the building. That doesn't really matter. I could be physically inside the building too, and I could say I'm in the hospital, meaning inside the building. But in the hospital generally has that specific meaning of being a patient, right? Like I could say I'm at the store. It doesn't matter if I'm outside of the building or inside of the building, I'm still at the store. That's the location. But if I'm outside of the building, I can't say I'm in the store. If I'm inside the building, I can say I'm in the store. Okay, I'm still at the store while being in the store. Okay, so they work at the same time. But in specifically means in while being at, right? And at means that you're not in, or at itself could be in or out. Okay, so it doesn't have that in information. So you can specify. Obviously, if you use in the store, you have to be at the store, right? So the at is implied. With hospital, because in the hospital has a specific meaning of being a patient, that's what we tend to use it for, even if you are physically inside the hospital. So let's say I take my friend to the hospital. We're both inside the building. You call me on the phone. You say, hey, where are you? I would probably say I'm at the hospital, even though I'm inside the building, because I don't want to tell you that I'm a patient, right? If I say I'm in the hospital, you'd be like, oh my God, what happened? However, right, context is important. If you know that, like, let's say I took my friend to the hospital, you're going to meet us there. Okay. So I get to the hospital first. My friend and I go inside. We're both inside the building. You arrive at the hospital, you park, you call me. You don't know where I parked, or am I inside, am I outside, where am I? So you say, hey, where are you? And you know I'm at the hospital. So you're not asking where, like on the planet, right? You know I'm already at the hospital. So with that context established that I am at the hospital, now, okay, if I say I'm in the hospital, it means I'm inside the building, not I'm a patient. So the context is very, very important. It depends on what information you have, right? That's one reason why the prepositions can be tricky, because the exact context can sort of shift what we can do, or what the speaker might understand, or the listener might understand. But hopefully that's really clear. It makes sense. Okay, what about restaurant, school, airport? Yeah, so these don't have the special meaning of being a patient, obviously. If you say I'm at the restaurant, I'm in the restaurant. If you're in the restaurant, you're also at the restaurant, but in specifically means inside. I'm at school. Now with at, we don't use the. You could say I'm at the school. School is also a little special, because since school is a place that you attend regularly, like through the first part of your life, if you say I'm at school, that's just a normal way to describe, like, I'm a student and I'm where I'm supposed to be to learn. Okay. If you say I'm at the school, that sounds more like you're not there to learn. Maybe you're a student, but maybe it's Saturday, right? You're going to meet your friend outside the school. They say, hey, where are you? I'm at the school. So you could still be a student, but not there to learn. Or maybe you're an adult, or you're a parent, whatever. And say your husband or wife calls you, say, hey, where are you? Oh, I'm at the school picking up, Susie. So again, context is important. In this case, it's context for the article, if we would use the article or not. But if you say I'm at the school, it means that's the location. If you say I'm in the school, then that means specifically inside the, doesn't have to necessarily be a building, because some schools, there's usually an outside area. But if you're inside the area of the school, even if you're not inside an actual building, you would say I'm in the school, because you're in that area. It's still a box, a container. If you say I'm at the airport, I'm in the airport, same thing. If you're in, you're also at, because that's the location. But if you are specifically inside the area of the airport, then you can say I'm in the airport. Now we draw a line there. Once you go into the building, you're in. If you're outside, like say you're waiting to be picked up by somebody, so you're waiting outside, like right on the sidewalk. So the airport is literally right here behind you, right? The building is right there, and there's a sidewalk that you're standing on, and the airport is like 2 feet away from you. You cannot say I'm in the airport, because that tells the person you're inside. Okay, so that the area of the airport, even though generally, yes, this is the whole abstract area, when you're communicating with somebody, in the airport means specifically I have gone through those doors. At would mean like, oh, I'm at the location of the airport, but probably you're outside. Now, of course, if you say I'm at the airport, you could also be in the airport. Remember, if you're in, you're also at. You're just not specifying if you're in or out. But it doesn't work the other way around. Okay. So anyway, we can see again a little bit of context there, depending on where we draw the line between in and out and all that stuff. But anyway, how could you? I was gonna say, how could you function words? That doesn't make sense. How could function words be pronounced when they are in isolation, in a pause, in actual speech, not an? If you say an actual speech, you're saying a speech, meaning like on stage, you're giving a speech to somebody. So we just say in actual speech, just meaning general speech, like real speech, when you're talking to a person. I don't know, but I think to go beach in its weak form or a strong form. Okay, well, number one, the sentence doesn't make any sense. I think maybe you go to a beach, and maybe you missed a word there. That would make more sense. But okay, so how could they be pronounced is a good question. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If I'm saying, so like for learning purposes, if I'm saying this is the word to, right? I'm trying to fully pronounce it, because it's not going to be stressed, but there's going to be a little arc to it. It's going to be nice and clear. We're probably not going to reduce it, because I'm talking about that word, right? What is that word? In actual speech, like you're asking here, it might be a little more common that we don't reduce it, but it doesn't matter. So if you say, I don't know, but I think to go to the beach, right? Now that would imply like where do you what do you want to do? Well, I want to go to a beach. It wouldn't be like to the beach. A little bit different use of to there, but you could also say, I don't know, but I think to go to the beach. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Now, also, so I know there's this term weak form and strong form. And there is actually a good case to use that. I thought of the other day, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's related to intonation. But anyway, I do not like these terms because, again, a lot of these, the ironic thing about linguistics, or the technical academic area of any field, they have lots of terms, but those terms can either be misleading or, at least from a general perspective, like if you're not actually in that field, could not be accurate enough. Like maybe within the field they're accurate enough because they have defined those lines, but then the average person looking at it is like, oh, okay. See, because when you say strong form, do you mean, like, I'm sure in linguistic there's actually a definition here. I'm not educated on the exact nuances of all the linguistic terms, but so from my perspective, if you say strong form, do you mean like it's not reduced, or do you mean stressed? Because both of those could be looked at as strong compared to the weak or reduced form. Or is the weak form just not stressed, and then the strong form is stressed, regardless of if there's a reduction on the weak or not? So this is one reason why I say like these terms can be misleading. They can be confusing to the average person, right? I'm trying to make things as easy as possible for somebody who, well, for everybody, but especially for somebody who doesn't have those terms. You don't have to go and learn those terms to be able to get all this stuff. It's not necessary. So so the answer to my question stands. I just wanted to comment on that. But anyway, stupid delivery service. All I've been doing over the week is hanging out with natives. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. All I've been doing over the week is hanging out with natives, so I didn't have enough time to think of overcomplicated questions. Well, that's. I mean, I guess you lose out on the complicated questions, but hanging out with natives is definitely good for your English. So good job. That's probably better than the question anyway. The stress length is something I came up with during my practice, however, and maybe that was partly the reason why I believed in those short and long E's and so on. Maybe, yeah. Yeah, the one thing that I just really don't get, as a little note here, I see Finn's here. Welcome, Finn. So somebody, I think it was Sergio, he commented on one of my videos. I think it was a couple of live streams ago. Oh no, it was on. I made a short a long time ago, talking about. I said like the vowel in set is not shorter than the vowel in said. And he commented on that, and he was talking about how like there's this video from Graham Lindsay. Talking about this topic and how the exact IPA symbols are kind of misleading and inaccurate and this and that, and how they should sort of like be modified and changed to reflect this. But number one, he's a British speaker. He even specifically said in standard Southern British accent. Doesn't mean it doesn't apply to American English. And I listed out all my thoughts. I gave him like this 4 big bullet points of my response to that. But in that video, he talks about how there's like leave and leaf, and I think it was leave and leaf, or save and safe, and how like on the screen, you see like, okay, well, if there's like leave or save, it's like this long, right? And then if you say like leaf or safe, it's like this long. And it's like, I understand if maybe you want to say like, okay, instead of this long, it's this long. Like maybe it seems a little shorter because we have to drop the voice to go into that voiceless sound. But to say it's like he literally said, I think it's something like 50% shorter or 60% shorter or something like that. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. That would break the language. So, but he's apparently an expert in the field. Again, he's talking about British English. It doesn't make any sense to me when people talk about this, because maybe I just can't hear it. My ears are generally really good. They're not perfect, but to be such a drastic difference, that's something that I would be able to easily notice. At least I would think so. So, because then you would have to say like, this isn't gonna be grammatically correct. If I say like, you have to leave, okay, and then I'm gonna replace it with leaf, even though it's not right, just for the comparison of the length here. I say you have to leave, you have to leave, you have to leave, you have to leave. Okay. Now, if I say you have to leave, you have to leave, leave. Let's say it's this long. Now, if I try to make leaf this long, dropping it by say 50%, you have to leave, you have to leave, you have to leave. You have to leave, you have to leave. Okay. Maybe there's a little bit of drop because of that illusion, right? As I go into that voiceless sound, but to drop it that much, that just it seems too much to me. Anyway, I know this is pretty off topic, but what about nothing off topic? No, never. What about Portuguese makes it sound good to you, especially in the Sao Paulo accent? Stay with it, pronounce the syllable final R's like American R's. So I haven't pinpointed it down. I mean, I did a little bit of study Portuguese for like a couple months, mostly on the sound system. And then I won't go into that whole story, but I was mostly doing that because I was doing something for Spanish at the time, and the class I needed to take wasn't available, but they had a Portuguese class available. And I was like, sure, let's do that. Portuguese seems interesting. So I spent a little bit of time with it. I don't know what it is. So there's something in my brain. I mean, obviously, like, anybody could listen to a particular language and say like, oh, that sounds ugly, or oh, that sounds, beautiful, or whatever. But there's just something about my brain, like I feel it physically, like in my gut, where like if I listen to Irish, right, Gaelic Irish, or Irish Gaelic, which I have some Irish ancestry. Never been to Ireland, really want to go. Okay, it's great. And the language in itself, nothing wrong with it. But when I listen to Irish Gaelic, it sounds like a garbage disposal to me. Not that it's like incomprehensible or anything. It's just like the way that the sounds interact. It sounds, I don't want to say it sounds like noise, because that seems very, well, I already said it sounds like a trash compactor, so or garbage disposal. That's pretty bad. I don't mean any offense by it, but it's just to my ears, to my particular ears, my particular weird individual brain. It doesn't like how that the language sounds. So I don't really, even though I would like to even though I would like to learn Irish Gaelic, because I have some ancestry there, and I want to go to Ireland and explore and all that stuff. It would be cool to like learn at least some of the language. I have like no interest in it because I don't like how it sounds. It might be kind of shallow, but because I like pronunciation so much, and I like playing with sounds, that's one of my number one criterias. If I don't like how the language sounds, everything else about it could be really cool, I probably won't want to learn it, just because I don't like how it sounds. And again, that's very subjective. It's just my brain is weird. I don't like how it sounds. Now, you go to a language like Spanish. I think Spanish sounds pretty cool. Some people say, "Oh, Spanish sounds so beautiful." It's like, yeah, okay. And it's a cool sounding language. It's great. I don't really get anything special from it necessarily, but I don't hate how it sounds. I like how it sounds. You go to Portuguese. I don't know what it is. Portuguese makes me feel good in my body. I don't know what it is. Specifically Brazilian Portuguese. I haven't heard a whole lot of Portuguese. I know there's some significant differences these days between them. But Brazilian Portuguese in particular, the melody, how the language flows, like you have these nasal sounds and these not nasal sounds. Like when you say like coração, sound just like that. It's just, I don't know what it is, but it's magical. It's magical. Now you put that in a French context, because French also has sort of these nasal vowel sounds, and in a French context, because I want to learn French too. Like I generally like the sound of French. I have a lot more French ancestry than Irish, and I generally like how French sounds. I think it sounds really good. But if we compare the nasal sound aspect between French and Portuguese, even though it might be the exact same sound, I don't know. I'm sure there's some shared nasal sounds there. In French, it actually, I don't like how it sounds for some reason. I don't know why. But in Portuguese, it's just like, it's magical, and it's, I don't know. I can't really explain it. My brain is weird. Also the R's. Now with like the final R's and the not final R's, I never completely mapped that and got that figured out, because I know it varies a bit. What I really like about the R's is the R's that are pronounced like what we would call an H. So like the money, I think you call it like the how or something like that. Or instead of in Rio, right, in Rio, something like that. That, I don't know why, just like pronouncing an R like an H, like my brain sees an R and knows that it's spelled with an R, but I'm pronouncing an H from an English perspective, and it's just something about that. Just my brain likes that. I don't know why. Just that weird combination is like, yeah, this is awesome. This is exciting. It's like I'm being, I don't want to say like, oh, I'm being rebellious or something, but it just seems so counter, because like you look at like the German R, the French R, the English R, the Spanish R, right? And I know Portuguese, it's not always H's, but the like you don't use to say German might be kind of close because it's kind of like a throaty R, but there's still a sound there, right? But when the places where Portuguese might replace an R with an H sound, I think that's just so radical to my brain. It's just fascinating. It sounds so amazing. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to stay on this topic forever, but it's just cool. Yeah. So much so that I'm so glad I started with Spanish, but knowing what I know now and how similar Portuguese and Spanish generally are anyway, if I had my knowledge back in the past and you're like, pick Spanish or Portuguese, I would probably pick Portuguese, even though it's spoken by not nearly as many people. I would pick Portuguese. And then it would also just be easier to learn Spanish on top of that, because now I'm going to a more limited sound system with many of the same words. Going the other way isn't quite as easy. But okay, when you respond to a question with "No, I didn't," do you usually flap the second D? First D is somewhat of a flap, but not really, right? Do you stop the T with the tongue there since it's already there for the N, or do you stop the T with the glottal stop, just adding a short I sound before it and making it nasal? Okay. So first question, do you flap the second D? Didn't. Yeah. Why? Because we have the I before it, and then we have either an I or an after it. But it depends on how you say it. There's, for this one little word, didn't, see if I enunciate it like that, didn't. Okay, I actually didn't flap the D there because I was enunciating it more. Remember that whole range. There's a range of pronunciation for each sound. But depending on how you pronounce it, right, you can say didn't, to where we're not pushing out or flapping the D. I'm going into that D position, doing that sort of that nasal plosive. And the T is just completely gone. Like we're not even stopping the T. There's no T there. Didn't, right? No, I didn't. So that's another way to say it. That's actually probably the single most common way, I would assume. But flapping the D would also be a very common way. As usual, the fully enunciated version would be the least common way. The first D is somewhat of a flap, but not really. Yeah, so here, I mean, it's, when we say didn't, that first syllable is stressed within the context of the word. So you would think, well, it's supposed to be, right, like you can't flap the D usually if it's at the start of a stressed syllable. It's kind of the general rule. We know some places that might kind of break, but there is a vowel before it. And although technically it's didn't, it is still, you know, the word did, it's function. It doesn't really matter all that much necessarily. The not is stressed, right? Negatives are stressed, so because that's technically content, we're canceling the content. But it's sort of in this weird place. So if I say no, I didn't, no, I didn't, no, I didn't. Possible where you can flap or kind of flap that D, yeah. Especially if you're speaking quickly. But it's supposed to be a regular D. It's supposed to be. And if you're not speaking super fast, it's probably going to come out more, a little, at least more solid than not. So that's kind of a gray area. Yeah, it's a weird one. Do you stop the T with the tongue? Okay, so when we talk about stopping the T, the T is special because not for like a held T, which is basically the same thing, but not quite. If I say what, and I just close that glottal, that's going to be interpreted as a T. It's not going to be interpreted as anything else. It's just a T. If I go into the position of the T, like I have to do for all the other stop sounds, and I stop it there, what. Now, obviously, there's a slight difference in sound there, but within the context of the language, we don't distinguish any difference there. And so they're both interpreted as stop Ts. So I can go into that position and still stop it. It doesn't matter. It's just the T has the option to actually not go into the position. So that's completely irrelevant. You can do whatever you want. Two ways to do the same thing. But if I say, in this case, so there's the N there, right? Which means I would already be in the T position. So if I say didn't, well, especially if I do that, I didn't, I'm actually dropping the T there because you can also add the stop T on that version, didn't, but it's not necessary because it's very clear that the N tells us the negative. But if I say didn't, and I don't do the nasal plosive, didn't. Let's say, right, we've talked before about like that nasal N, or not nasal N, like the nasal vowel option before an N. In certain cases like this, can we do that? And then maybe we're not in that T position anymore because we're not even going into the N, and then I can just stop it here. Okay, didn't. So that's what I'm doing there. I'm slightly nasalizing that the second I, right? That's normal. I'm letting it go through the nose more, and then I just cut off here. You can do that too. Doesn't matter. So for this particular word, there's like 6 different ways that you can do it, and it doesn't matter. Okay, stupidity literature. I studied Chinese for 2 years. Wow, that's impressive. And dropped it after all because after all is a little bit weird here. And I know why you would want to put it there. It's one of those things where it's like, why? Well, just because. I'll probably say in the end, which basically means the same thing, but after all has a little bit of a specialness to it. Anyway, so I studied Chinese for 2 years and dropped it in the end because it sounds ugly and the sounds are pretty much boring. I just couldn't bring myself to go on with it. Interesting. Okay. Well, I don't know why you studied it in the first place. Maybe you felt you had to. Like maybe it was for school or work or something. I don't know. But like that's one reason why I start there. Like if I don't like how it sounds, I'm not going to spend my time on it. Unless maybe I have to for some reason. So now when we say Chinese, right? Like what does that mean? Mandarin, Cantonese, probably Mandarin, right? That's the big one. So that's what we assume. For me, Mandarin is on my list. It's probably gonna be one of the last languages or last main languages that I learn. But it's definitely on my list for various reasons. But I like the way it sounds. Some of it can kind of, yeah, maybe it's not necessarily so pretty, but especially like the way that the different tones are used and just like how the language flows. I like how it sounds. So everybody's different. It's subjective. Although describing the sounds as boring doesn't make any sense to me because like literally every sound has like 4 possibilities depending on the tone you put on it. Like that's the opposite of boring. That's a party. Japanese is a superior language in my opinion. Well, I would hesitate to say superior because that's that's kind of I mean, I guess you could say whatever you want. I'm not offended personally, but some people might be. We don't have to be PC, but if I compare Mandarin and Japanese, like I'm much more interested in Japanese. I wouldn't say it's objectively better. Imperialistic much exactly. I wouldn't say it's objectively better. Just like I don't think like Irish is objectively like a horrible language or inferior in some way because I don't like how it sounds. It's just like I don't like how it sounds. Whatever. But I have a much bigger interest in Japan and Japanese culture and Japanese language, and Japanese food, and Japanese music, and Japanese everything compared to China, right? For Chinese. So, yeah, Japanese is definitely higher on my list for sure of desire to learn. We'll say, but I don't think that any language is superior than another. Obviously, any speaker of any language can express anything that they want. Like your language doesn't bar what you can potentially express, but languages are different, right? They do color things to an extent. And like Japanese is actually a really good example. I can't think of any of the specific words because I never actually learned them, but there's I think like 5 or 6 words in Japanese that are used for emotions that you use that one of those words and like a Japanese speaker knows exactly, just like if I say I'm happy, like you may not know exactly how I feel, but you know what happiness feels like, right? That's a commonly expressed emotion, so there's a word for it. But in Japanese, there's like within Japanese history and culture, they put words on these certain other emotions that English hasn't put words on, and we might describe it as like indescribable, or we might have to take like a whole paragraph to try to describe the same thing, where Japanese just has like the word to describe it and another Japanese speaker will understand what you mean. So like that, obviously that's a benefit. You could say that in that sense, Japanese is maybe superior at expressing, those emotions, those specific emotions that we don't have words for. But it's all relative, right? You can say Japanese is superior in this aspect, but then this other language is superior in this aspect. Like, and superior again is all relative, so it's not absolutely superior. It doesn't really matter. I don't even look at it that way, but we maybe say easier, more difficult, or more complicated, less complicated. Like Japanese, I think, which obviously I'm not an advanced Japanese speaker. I'm not even an intermediate Japanese speaker. So there's a lot I don't know, but based on my knowledge of Japanese, Japanese is I think, how do I want to put this? Compared to English, a lot of how Japanese works seems to be not complex. And I don't mean like it's lacking depth or anything like that. That's not at all what I'm saying. But when you learn the patterns, like obviously like there's conjugation patterns in languages, right? And those will tend to repeat. But like in Japanese, they conjugate verbs, they conjugate adjectives. I guess is kind of shared with German a little bit. It's kind of similar. But then like, you know, so it's like there's the past tense endings, which can also apply to adjectives, right? Or whatever it is. I'm rusty on my Japanese, but it's almost like Japanese has like, it's like a puzzle piece between roots and ending patterns, basically. And it's like the whole language is like more or less composed of that. And then you have certain particles, right? You bring particles in, and now you have a ball. You have ball meaning like a party. So it's probably more complex than I realized, but compared to English, right, or even compared to Spanish, which you can see the similar type of patterns. You see like I go, he goes, you go, we go. Japanese just say it like iku, right? Ikimasu. And they don't even have a future tense. Like that's pretty simple. So yeah, Japanese relies a lot on context. Anyway, yeah, I was wondering because since your tongue is already there for the N with the I sound optional, it seems pretty optional because it's possible to just do the nasal plosive into a stop T with the tongue and flapping the second D, adding the vowel after it, making this vowel nasal and stopping the T. Yeah, basically. Also, the Chinese way of life kept depressing me all the way. That communistic vibe around it didn't help my learning at all. Yeah, so obviously in modern Japan, there's that communistic undertone there. There's a whole other topic. I mean, historically, you know, there wasn't communism. It's a very, very old culture, very deep roots and stuff. That's where a lot of my interest is. It's like, I mean, I don't want to learn ancient Chinese, but that, you know, traditional culture. I like that about Japan too, and also Korea. Like this sort of like the Warring States period and all that stuff is a very interesting period of history. Gets romanticized a lot, obviously, but yeah, these days, obviously, the culture is going to be colored by communism, and they have like their social system or whatever it is, like some like social point system and all that stuff. And yeah, but I don't know. That to me isn't enough for me to not want to learn a language. It is like a downside, but you know, I look past that. It's like the language itself. Like obviously, culture is part of language, but just because the country happens to be communistic doesn't like stain the language itself, right? Especially because it has such a deep history. So it's just the language itself is interesting to me. Plus, it's outside my experience. I've never been to China, so like we know that they have a communist government, which we generally frown upon here in the West. And I know people who have been to China, and they tell me that yeah, there's some negative things in that field, that area. But because it's outside of my experience, I also hesitate to say like, oh, this or that, because I've never been there. Right. So I'm not going to say like, oh yeah, maybe it'll be so great when I go there. Like I'm sure there's actual things and issues and stuff. But If something is outside my experience, I might have an opinion on it, but I don't want to say like this is true, because I haven't experienced it. So when you combine the words Mad Hatter, for example, do you do a flap D into an H or a weak D? I notice that to me it usually comes out as a flap D into an H. So like Mad Hatter, Mad. How do you even do that? Mad Hatter, Mad Hatter. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I guess we can do that. That's kind of weird. Yeah. So the default, the rule there would be to link through the H. Possible to keep the H. That threw me off for a second because I never actually thought about that specific case. But yeah, you can do that. Because the H, remember, like that this is just another reason for me to describe the H as a voiceless vowel, right? It takes the shape of the vowel after it. Because you can still flap. You can either flap through it and drop the H completely, or you can sort of flap into the voiceless ah and then just add the voice. So it still works. Yeah, there's no problem. There's no right answer there. Like, should you keep the H or should you not? It doesn't matter. I would say it's probably very common to drop the H. But this particular combination, right, it's like a character from Alice in Wonderland. I hope that noise outside isn't too loud. We tend to actually say, I mean, we might still flap the D, but we tend to say more like Mad Hatter, Mad Hatter. So we're actually, there's kind of a flap there, but I'm not just like simply flapping it and moving on. It's the name of that character, and we kind of tend to maybe linger on that D just a little bit to kind of make it solid before we release it. And then really push out that H nice and clearly in that particular case. A lot of the times, like if you happen to have a D and then a word that starts with an H, it may not matter as much, but that's a little bit of a special case as well. In the word constantly, can you apply the I plus NT? What the heck is that? There's an I plus NT rule? That's what I'm calling it. Okay. Okay, I like how you're using a nasal symbol. Okay, I gotta wrap my head around this. I don't know what we're talking about. Okay, okay. The word constantly. Okay. Oh. I was gonna say, why is it I plus NT, but constantly? Yeah, so you use the I there. Okay, and then you're asking constantly or dropping the glottal T and saying constantly. Okay. Okay, so the slash then is the stop T. Okay. Constantly, constantly, constantly. In this particular case, playing with it, you actually, I think you might be reading a bit too much into the nasalizing vowels thing. If you do it that way, where you kind of nasalize the I, don't pronounce an N, and then either do a stop T or just no T at all, that does work. It's fine. Or constantly doing that. He's constantly doing that. Yeah. Or you could wait. Hold on. Make sure I'm not doing that nasal. Constantly. He's constantly doing that. Constantly doing that. Yeah. Or if you're speaking, especially if you're speaking fast enough, you actually don't have to nasalize the vowel at all. You can just drop the N completely. Don't nasalize the vowel and either do a stop T or no T. So you can literally say like constantly. Now, that particular one where there's no stop T, you definitely got to be speaking fast enough, right? So he's trying to do it intentionally is weird. Constantly. He's constantly doing it. Constantly. Okay. If you do the stop without nasalizing anything and you still drop the N, that you don't even have to be saying as quickly. Constantly. Okay. Now you actually notice before I close that off, it does seem like I'm kind of getting a little bit of a nasalization, but I'm not saying like eh, I'm not fully nasalizing that vowel. So maybe there's still a little bit of it in there, but yeah, this I don't know if I would go so far to say that this would be a rule, but maybe you've seen it in other cases. Yeah, see, I didn't even get to that part. I figured it out. Actually, not even I plus NT rule. It's vowel plus NT rule. Yeah, see, that would make more sense. It's a little broader. Maybe that's a rule. I don't know. You can give me more examples. We can explore that. Talked to a girl who had to study for 12 hours at school every day. Man, it's just killing me. I assume we're still talking about China. Because, yeah, they do that. I don't think that's just China. But, yeah. I know in Japan even, I don't know if they do 12 hours a day, but they're, students who I want to keep this family friendly, but they end their lives because they got a bad grade, which is insane. Way too much academic pressure. That is an unacceptable level of academic pressure. But hey, whatever. That's how things are, I guess. I don't know. A forced 12 hours a day at school, which you would probably have to do for a kid. Like nobody's gonna want to go to school for 12 hours a day as a kid. That probably is too much. But from a broader perspective, like let's say I was trying to really learn something. Like I want to go really deep. I want to say say I don't know how to play the guitar, and I'm just like I want to do like over the next week. I'm just gonna say like how far I can get at the guitar. Like that's all I'm gonna do, right? Like 12 hours a day. I'm just gonna like work on the guitar. That could be a good thing. Maybe. I mean, one of the reasons why Jimi Hendrix was so good is because literally he sat in his room 8 hours a day playing the guitar. Like you get pretty good when you do that. So yeah, I don't know. But forcing that on kids is probably a bit much. Is there a difference in from what? Oh, in form. I can't read. Yeah, that's okay. Is there a difference in form? Between maybe this doesn't make sense. Is there a difference in form the law vowel is pronounced in some natives? That doesn't make any sense. Is there a difference in the way some natives pronounce the law vowel? Maybe that's the question. No cot merger. According to Wikipedia, Hillary Clinton and actress Nadia Bjorlin pronounced this vowel different. Okay, so yeah, I understand the question. So like where they don't have the merger, so they have like aw, okay, but say one native says it like aw and another one says it like aw or something like that. I don't know, some slight difference. Probably. This just goes more to because I don't know if it's necessarily a strict difference because remember every sound has a range. But there are also maybe little regional differences that maybe the accent is generally the same. Like say for me, right? I have the cot merger. My accent is generally the same as a neutral sounding American native. So I have a neutral accent, but I have the cot merger. right? Something that's a little different, which that's not a good case because pretty much everybody is developing the cut merger. So what I would say is don't care. It doesn't matter. It really does not matter. Number one, especially since, I mean, if you want to learn the unmerged version where you have the two sounds because you like how that sounds, that's perfectly fine. It's personal choice. That's good. It's not going to make you sound any more natural. It's not going to make you sound any more neutral. It's just you're making your life a little harder because you like how it sounds. That's perfectly fine, right? You might make that choice. If I'm learning a language, and let's say I like this particular accent versus that particular accent, even though this accent might be a little harder to do, but I like how it sounds, I could choose to do that. I don't have to make my life easier because I like how this sounds. That's perfectly fine. But when it comes to a question like this, like, okay, well, this person is a native, that person is a native, they pronounce this exact sound a little bit differently. Who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. They're both, I mean, I've never heard this other person speak, so I have to look it up, but if they're both native speakers and they both have a generally neutral accent, they're generally going to sound pretty much the same, even if the pronunciation of a particular sound is slightly different. It does not matter. If it's different enough and it starts to stand out, then you might start to get a little bit of an accent or something, but it generally doesn't matter. And as a the only reason why I see that this would be relevant to you as an English learner is if you want to learn without the merger, so you want to learn both of the sounds, and you discovered that there are two native speakers who pronounce it slightly different, and so now you're like, oh, okay, well, which one should I use? That's the only time this question would be relevant. I assume maybe that's your case. In which case I would say just pick one. Just pick one. Now again, this Nadia person, I'm assuming she has a neutral accent, that she's probably a native speaker. I don't know. Last name is not English, so I don't know if this person was born here or if they have any, subtle influence in their pronunciation from their parents or this or that, because that can happen sometimes. But as a general rule, I would say never do anything that Hillary Clinton does, because she's probably one of the single. I'm going to keep this. I can say this very, very strongly, and I'm not going to, even though I really want to. I'll just put it very simply and cleanly. She's one of the single worst human beings alive. And I would want to say in history, but looking on history, I mean, there's some really bad people. So maybe not that much, but she's up there. She's up there. So pronounce it like Nadia does, not like Hillary. That would be my advice. It wouldn't be the same for me because I do have the merger. People with the merger, as I said before, sometimes, right, a word that someone without the merger, if it's a or all, whichever word it is, sometimes we with the merger, if it's a hot, we'll actually get into that ah sound, or if it's all like law or on, whatever, we might get into that ah sound. That can happen. It doesn't matter. We generally are in the merged sound, and they're just pronounced the same. And we don't even notice that we do that. I only notice it in me because now I have a bit of ear training on it, because working with you guys and working with sounds and stuff in American English, and then going back and listening to my videos, because when I'm speaking, I very rarely, if ever, notice it. But when I'm editing my videos, sometimes I'll notice, oh, I use the unmerged version there. Interesting. That's weird. But it doesn't matter. It does not matter at all. Now, if you start mixing things up to the point where, like, let's say it's supposed to be hot, which uses the unmerged ah, and let's say you change that to ah and you say hot, then you have a problem. that does not work. So you either want to learn the merger, or you either want to learn the two sounds that aren't merged and learn when to use which one, which makes your life a lot harder for no reason, unless you just like the sound, or learn the merger. And just because a native who has the merger will sometimes slip into the unmerged version doesn't mean you have to, right? You just always use that one sound and it doesn't matter. So yeah. Now with the merger specifically, let's say me with the merger and somebody else with the merger, is it possible for me to do it a slightly different way than that person? Probably. Does it matter? Not really. So yeah, remember there's a range for every sound. There's a range for every sound. As long as you're within range and it doesn't start sounding like a different sound, then there's no problem. Remember, there's also the full version and the lazy version. I saw it. I saw, okay? Or, I saw it. I saw it. Now, if you listen very closely, and they sound a little bit different. Not different enough for within the context of the language for a native to distinguish it as a different sound. Okay, so that's a difference that doesn't matter. One's just lazier. It's not fully articulated. Kevin, welcome, Kevin. Kevin, why? Any tips to pronounce words like end, enter properly? I can pronounce words like best and pest with good S sound, but when there's an N following the E, it often sounds like ah. It's like and. There's two things here. One, that they can sound quite similar, yes, especially if your ears aren't trained. There's actually three things here. So they can sound quite similar, right? They're pretty similar sounds, especially because we go at and et and right. We're kind of going roughly the same path up into the N, and so more so compared to if we just do et or ah, they might sound a little bit similar because they both have that path up to the N, and it can kind of obscure the sound a little bit. So might need a little bit of ear training there. Ear training is usually the answer anyway. Just target it and compare. So if you like end and you do minimal pairs between that, or enter, anter is not a word, but you can still use it to train your ears. That would be the general advice. But two things that could be happening here in addition to that. One is in... I don't know if this is exclusively a Western American thing, but I have heard that in Western American English, one thing that it's not like we do it, like it's the accent. It's something that we sometimes do, where I and E can be lowered a little bit. And so I will sound a little bit more like E, and E will sound a little bit more like A. Even potentially to the point that somebody who's not from the West Coast, if we happen to lower the E, that they might hear it as an A. Again, that's not like a Western accent. That's something that Westerners sometimes do. So that could be confusing your ears a little bit. If you're listening to somebody from the West, maybe they happen to be dropping down when you hear them say a word like that. That wouldn't explain all cases, but it could be in the mix. The other thing, probably the most important thing here, I talked about this a bit before. This is, I don't think this gets talked enough, I don't think this gets talked about at all in English teaching. Maybe there's somebody out there aside from me who's talking about it, but I've never seen anybody else talking about it. N, any vowel before N becomes partially nasalized. Any vowel, every vowel. I don't care if it's E, it could be I, whatever it is, R, okay. it gets slightly nasalized, not fully nasalized. It doesn't become a nasal vowel in the sense it's like, say, Portuguese has a nasal vowel, French has a nasal vowel, but it gets a little bit of nasalization. And so this, the velum back here that opens, right, that nasal flap that opens and closes. If I just say ah, ah. So for most Americans, some people speak a little more nasally. That's just how they speak. But for most Americans, the only nasal sounds we have is and right? M, N, and the NG. And those are the sounds that go fully through the nose. When we're not doing those sounds, theoretically, ideally, that nasal flap is mostly closed. It's not necessarily 100% closed. It might be 100% closed, but it's mostly closed, right? So we hear like 90, 95, maybe 99% of the sound coming through the mouth. It doesn't sound nasally. And then, of course, if you do right, we block off the mouth in this position, and it goes up through the nose. It's fully nasal, okay? But what happens when we have any vowel before an N is that nasal flap, the velum, it will open slightly more, not full on. Okay, so we don't say, like, say if it were okay, we don't say like there it is. It's not where it's like mostly through the nose or halfway through the nose. It's just a little bit more. So it's like maybe now 10%, 15% through the nose at the most. Still mostly through the mouth because we don't officially have any nasal vowels. But N has that effect. Okay. M can also have that effect. It's really strong with N. Now, when teachers talk about before N or M, they talk about how, like, oh, well, it becomes plus It's like, as I've talked about before in the lesson about the truth about before N or M, that's something that can happen. That's not what happens. It can happen. But one of the reasons why it sounds different, regardless of if we do it plus or not, is because, my theory at least, all the vowels before N are slightly nasalized. But because we have this velum up here, as down here, it's sort of an extreme position, extreme sound, very open. And then the velum is here, and it's almost kind of like we can hear that extra nasality a little bit more, right? If I say and instead of okay, because I'm getting ready for the N. So if I just do an that nasal flap doesn't necessarily open more. But if I know I'm going into an N, the nasal flap is going to open before any vowel. It's going to slightly open more in preparation for the N. But we hear it more clearly in the because of that extreme position difference. That's my theory. But if I say E, okay, I could do a normal E and then an E plus N, okay? E, E, een, E, E, E. You can hear a little more through the nose. E, 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 een, een. Okay. Now if I do een, so I'm trying to keep it through the mouth. I'm not letting any nasalization come through the E, and then just closing into the N where the nasal takes over. It sounds weird. So it doesn't matter if it's E, O. There's always a little bit of nasalization before an N, and commonly before an M, but N is the big one. So when, and this can also confuse your ears as well. So when you're hearing end or enter, okay, end, if I say end, and I try to keep it through the mouth, it sounds a little bit weird. And but I do open that flap just a little bit, and slightly more nasal. And that could be confusing your ears and making it sound a little bit more like and. Okay. In comparison, maybe you hear the difference, maybe you don't, but that extra nasalization may be what's confusing your ears between the two, because and are already a difficult pair for many English learners. So first you want to train your ears to make sure you can hear the difference between and that you can produce the difference between and then you move on to the N combination. Make sure you can hear the difference between N and that you can produce the difference between N and an. So that's all it is. So we are technically out of time, guys. I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. But please, unless you have an absolute important burning question, save it for next time. So let's finish this up here. Hi, Josh. How are you doing? I'm good, Mr. Mac Valley. Welcome, welcome. Please, why do we pronounce Houston as Houston rather than oo sound? Okay, I don't know what you mean. I have no idea what your question is, because it looks like you're asking me, why do we pronounce Houston instead of Houston? Which is the same thing. I think maybe you mean between like in book, and oo, like the oo sound, like you. Maybe that's what you're asking. See, when you say the o sound, that means nothing. Like there is no o sound. You're just writing 2-letter O's. Like I could interpret that as O. I don't know why I probably just put one O, but I can interpret that as O. I can interpret that as oo. I can interpret that maybe as Like I don't know exactly what you're saying there. Writing OU and OO does not make any sort of difference between how we would perceive those sounds in written form, because OO and OU are both common spelling patterns for similar sounds. So if you could slightly reformulate your question, I can come back to that, because I think the way you think we pronounce it is not accurate. That's my assumption. But if you can clarify exactly what you're asking there, we'll take care of that. Hint, accent, didn't, meant, can't, and, mountain, mustn't, shouldn't, couldn't, saint, ain't are all examples of vowel plus NT rule. Okay. It's always optional, but I find this feature a very prominent thing in spoken English. I see it everywhere, probably because we're lazy to raise our tongues and do the N with the tongue and then stop the T with the tongue too. Okay. So this vowel plus NT rule would be where we nasalize the vowel, which again doesn't officially exist, but we nasalize the vowel, and this is different from what I was just talking about with the N, completely different topic. Drop the N and then stop the T. Okay. Probably stop the T without the tongue. So hint. I'll give you a hint. Hint. I'll give you a. I'll give you a hint. Hint. I'll give you a hint. I'll give you a hint. 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 I'll give you a hint. I'll give you a hint. I'll give you a hint. Okay, that is interesting. Accent. 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 Okay. Didn't we talk about that? Meant, can't, and. Well, I would already be nasalized there anyway. Mountain. Mountain. Okay. Yeah, so what I'm noticing here, I do think that this is a rule, an unofficial rule. And I do agree that it's optional. but it does exist. It's a way to pronounce these things. In fact, it seems to me that in all of these cases, you don't even have to nasalize the vowel. Again, maybe at the end, before we stop the T, maybe there's a little bit of nasalization going on, and that's where the N is. But you don't have to straight nasalize that vowel. But regardless, yeah, we don't have to actually close into the N. And of course, we don't have to close into the T because we can stop it from the glottis. Yeah, I think I'll probably make a lesson on that at some point. And of course, I will give Finn credit for discovering a new rule. Yeah. I think it's gonna, I don't know. I think it's gonna help a lot of people who especially if they're like Portuguese speakers or French speakers who have a better ear for nasality. It's probably gonna help inform them like, oh, that's why I hear that, right? Because they might just think it's the trick of their ears or something. But it's also kind of an advanced thing. Like this definitely isn't something I would teach on day one to somebody. So it'll be a little limited in value, but I think it will help a lot of people who are, upper intermediate to advanced. Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting. Good work. Very good work. Okay. Heck, even in the words mountain, within words, mountain can sometimes come as mountain. Yeah, mountain. It was on the mountain. Mountain. Can work. Now it's not necessarily. No, it completely stops the T there, or drops the T there. I didn't even use the stop T. If you do that, you want to make sure you hold the N. You actually do have to close in the N there. You can't just say like mountain. That's a little too much. But if you can either stop the T and then add the N after it, or if you don't stop the T, you lengthen out the N. And that also works. So there's another way to say it. But some words like want or watch can be pronounced both with an ah and with an ah if you don't have the merger. Want? Is want, right? Want? Watch? That's starting to sound, at best, it's starting to sound like a Southern accent. And if I were to hear somebody say want, my ears would interpret that not as want, but as went with an eh. Because it's probably because ah and eh are a lot closer than ah. That's no, like oh as in hot and ah as in caught. Don't have the merger. I'm confused. Oh, so the ah. So you're saying that the AH that you wrote there would be the O like in hot. Okay. Want. Okay, so if I don't have the merger, something like that. Hot, want, watch. Okay, yeah, that I guess that makes more sense. That yeah. I would completely ignore that. But if it's something you noticed, then okay. Once your ears get really, really, really good, there's going to be a lot of very fine, subtle nuances that do not matter. And it's good that you can hear them. But again, it's like if I say ah, or I say a lazier ah, technically there's a little subtle difference between them, but one's just a lazy version of the other sound. It doesn't matter. It's in the same range. So not every little difference you hear is going to be significant, and there's a lot that you don't have to care about. But anyway, back to my previous question. Is it fine to say I play good versus I play well? How about eat good or bad? With eat, I can't really answer that because it's just weird. Like, how can you eat good or eat bad? Like I guess maybe with well or poorly, which is the proper one, um like eat good or bad just doesn't make any sense. But if you say he eats well, that means that like he gets enough food, right? He regularly eats to, for nutrition, for health, not like he's, eating way too much and getting really fat or anything. If you say he eats poorly, then like he doesn't eat enough food, or what he does eat is a lot of junk food. It's a lot of low nutritious food. So that would make sense. But eat good or eat bad just doesn't make any sense. At least off the top of my head, I can't think of where that would work. If you say I play good versus I play well, what's technically correct is well. Okay. That is sort of like we were talking about, like with badly, right? How you're technically supposed to use the adverb to modify the verb. It should be play well and play poorly. You can say play badly. It works. There's not a problem with it. But we don't say play goodly, obviously. Goodly isn't a word. So well is what's technically correct and proper there. And you say I play well, that's perfectly fine. People say that, there's no problem. If you say I play good, that is acceptable. It works. It does sound a little informal. One of the things that you have to be aware of is in cases like this where okay, like well is the technically grammatically correct one, and then good is technically wrong, but still works, still sounds okay. In some cases, it doesn't really matter. Like if you say I'm well, I'm good, like that's pretty much just what everybody says, I'm good. But in a case like this, I play well, I play good. If you use the one that is technically not correct, because things change over time, right? This is something that's in the process of changing. It's at the point where the incorrect one generally will sound fine, may even be completely interchangeable with the correct one, but there are also many times where it can sound a little more informal, because in that particular case, or that particular context, or whatever, a particular sentence, it hasn't necessarily. Oh my god! Really hate that car. It hasn't necessarily fully transitioned in the subconscious over time. So you gotta be aware that sometimes it'll sound informal if you use the incorrect one, but usually it doesn't sound too informal. God, I really hate that car. Referring to eat good foods on time. Eating good foods on time. That doesn't make any sense. So that still doesn't work. She is not an only child. Actually, she has 3 sisters. Is the word actually in the correct order? Well, in the correct place. She is not an only child. Actually, she has 3 sisters. There's nothing wrong with that. You can put actually at the end. She's not an only child. She has 3 sisters. She has sisters. She has 3 sisters, actually. Yeah, you could do that. This placement here in this particular context and sentence would probably be the best place for it, but you could move it to the end. They both work. One thing I'd like to add is that in faster speech, you can always drop glottal stops, and this applies to the vowel plus NT rule too. Okay. Well, I am aware that it's very common for us to drop, like just completely drop a T in fast speech, for sure. I don't know if that always works necessarily, but probably more or less. And yeah, it applying with the vowel plus NT, that makes sense, because we've already seen before how like it's really the N, or at least the appearance of the N through the nasal, that really gives us that NT part. Like with the NT plus vowel rule, we already usually drop the T and connect to the vowel anyway. So that T kind of doesn't really matter a lot of the time. Okay, and then Wendell, in 9 Certain Street, the number 9 is supposed to be an ordinal number. So it's got to be like this, 9th Certain Street. No. No, that's not how we do that. So if you're talking about the name of the street, like if it's 9th Street, yes. When we're talking about the specific address, the number that is on that building, or that unit, whatever it is, we don't add we don't make it ordinal. It stays cardinal. So like I could say I live at 123 Main Street, or 123 Main Street, however I want to say 123, 123, doesn't matter. I can say 123. I live at 123 Main Street. But either way, it's not I live at 123rd Main Street. That seems a little weird. I'd be flattered if you made a video on it, though. Yeah, probably will at some point. Hopefully I remember. Not my focus right now. But it's definitely interesting. I will definitely give you credit for it. And I mean, it's an advanced hack. So it fits right in with the channel. It works perfectly. So yeah, probably at some point. Kevin White, first visit, good stuff. Please keep up the good work. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks for the comment there. And yeah, I do have to go. We are over time again. Try to finish it up by 1:30. We kind of go maybe till 2, but I usually have to go by 2 for sure. So let's see. Anything I want to say before I go? Working on the rise fall intonation lesson. I really hope that it doesn't come out too confusing, because with what we talked about in the fall rise lesson, it might kind of seem a little confusing. But I discovered the pattern of the rise fall, the underlying system pattern, and it makes a lot of sense to me. But just like with the fall rise, it can be used in cases that don't seem to be connected, and it can apply in like slightly different ways. And so this kind of stuff, like that's how languages work. They're messy. They have this subconscious root that then sort of grows out in different ways, and this way might seem different than this way, but it's still attached to the same root, and it does make sense in some way. So hopefully this lesson will come out well. I should definitely have that done by tonight. I feel pretty certain about that, but there's a chance maybe not. Got to get this intonation series done. I'm maybe about halfway through, which is good. So we're getting there. But thank you guys very much for coming and hanging out and asking questions. Very productive live stream. Stay tuned for the next lesson, and I will see you guys next week, same time. Bye, Finn.